Let me begin firstly. Good evening. Thank you all for coming and coming to our house, both whether in person or those joining us on Zoom. Let me just begin by saying that the shiur, as you've seen, is dedicated Leilui Nishmas Rina Miriam Bas Reb Shmuel, late Mrs. Rina Bowden Newman, and she was someone who I know there are many people who are at the shiur this evening who knew her very well and classed with her. And she was a person who is very much remembered as tremendously edel and Yerei Shamayim in every way. Her actual outside is Chovov Elul, so it's in a couple of days' time. But the shiur this evening is dedicated to Leilui Nishmosa, and the family and her friends should only have simchas. So the title of the shiur: Innovation from Inauguration, and I think hopefully it will become apparent very soon why it is that this is an appropriate topic and title for this shiur. And really the key is in the very first line. If you've got the sheets, it's in the first line. If you haven't got the sheets, those on Zoom, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything. So basically, if you look at the words at the top there, Chodesh, Shana, Rosh Chodesh, and Rosh Hashanah. So we understand the difference between a Chodesh and a Shana. What's the difference between a Chodesh and a Shana? Chodesh, of course, is Chodesh, new, right? Shana means to repeat, means a repetition, right? Or, for example, just the word Shana related to Sheni, as in second, right? Something which repeats itself. Why is that? Because the year, by definition, is a cycle which repeats itself every year. That's how we define what a year is. And the Chodesh, we always refer to in the connection of the month, the newness of the month, the newness of the moon, etc., etc. So Rosh Chodesh is understandable. Rosh Chodesh is the beginning of a new month. That's understandable. But in essence, there is a paradox in Rosh Hashanah because it's a contradiction. If the word Shana means to repeat, because the cycle of the year comes around once more, right? That's what it is. That's what a year is. It repeats. It comes again. Effectively, what you're trying to do is insert something which is the beginning, a start again, the Rosh, right? The head, the new beginning, right? Into something which is a repetition, a closed cycle, something which repeats itself, something which comes round again. And therefore, it's effectively a contradiction. It's a paradox in terms. To put it in more practical, in a practical way, if you have something which repeats itself, as someone once put it to me, one of the most predictable things we have is the Jewish calendar. It's always amazing how we end up realizing it's Rosh Hashanah, like on Erev Rosh Hashanah, but it's incredibly predictable. It's the same every year. It's always on Aleph Tishrei. There's no change, and yet everything we have is entirely predictable. We know when it's coming. So how do you insert into something which you know is coming every year something which is innovative, something which is new? What can make an attitude, an approach to Rosh Hashanah which makes it different? Moshe Shapiro puts it like this, and much of the ideas I'm going to share with you this evening are from various parts of his Toras, his thought on Rosh Hashanah, is how do we overcome this paradox? How do we actually insert a real Rosh, a real beginning into that which is a Shana, that was a repetition and simply a repetitive cycle? That's really the question we're going to try and answer, and it's really the challenge of Rosh Hashanah itself, and what it is trying to achieve. And hopefully, as you'll see, it will lead us into a pathway towards developing what I think is a much deeper understanding, and something which I think can hopefully really help and elevate our tefillas and elevate our whole everything to do with Rosh Hashanah itself. So, of course, in the tefillas themselves, we emphasize that the second line, this day, the day of Rosh Hashanah, is the beginning of your works. It's the remembrance of the first day. So that tells us that link as with Rosh Hashanah itself. We know that Rosh Hashanah is the actual commemorates the day of what is the first day, the day of the creation of Adam Arisha, right? That's what it is. That day when Adam himself was created. So trying to get to where we'll hopefully arrive at with this is understanding how that itself, the fact that it is the day of creation, the day of creation of man in particular, is the key towards understanding what Rosh Hashanah is meant to achieve. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Ba'asara ma'amoros nivra ha'olam." This is source 1. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in 10 utterances, 10 statements. So the question is, you could create the world b'ma'amar echad, once. Ella, says the Gemara, to extract punishment from the Rishonim who destroy the world created with 10 utterances. So to give a reward to tzaddikim, to the righteous, who establish the world that was created by Asara Ma'amor. So in other words, what you have is that Hashem creates the world in such a way that with these 10 statements, and the meaning behind these 10 statements is to either give reward for those who effectively do the right thing in the world, and to the opposite, to those who do not. What is noteworthy, though, the Medrash points out that if you look carefully, these 10 utterances that form the basis of the description of creation. So if you look through Bereshis, the first paragraph, you'll see Hashem says, "Vayhi or," for example, right? And it shall be that. There are 10 statements. This shall happen. This shall happen. This shall. Problem is, there's only 9. That's the problem. If you count them, there's only 9. So the Medrash of the Gemara asks, I think it's a Gemara. The Gemara says, "There's a problem." The Gemara says, "Bereshis nami ma'amar." That's the answer to the Gemara. That the word Bereshis in the beginning is also a statement. It's also one of those utterances. When Hashem declares, "Let there be light," Yihiro Kia, there should be a firmament, right? There are 9 of those, and the 10th, the first one, is the word Bereshis itself. Okay? Now, the problem is that it's not a statement. Bereshis bara Elokim, right? However you translate it, Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning of Hashem creating, when Hashem, however you understand and translate the first pasuk in the Torah, the fact is that it's not a statement, the word Bereshis. So the idea is, says Rabbi Shapiro, as follows, that there is no command that's possible, no tzivui, no command that's possible for what is a true beginning. And that is because a command, an instruction to do something, can only follow an act of creation, right? An act of new existence. You first need to create in order for there to be someone or something to command, right? There can't be, it doesn't work. When you start something, it cannot begin through a command. You can't start off by saying there should be something. We're explaining it in human terms, obviously. In order to begin something, if you begin with this command, that doesn't make sense. There has to be a beginning first. And any beginning is like that. Any beginning, whenever you establish something, whenever the reality of creation itself is established, it doesn't begin with a command. The commands come afterwards. Okay? Come, take a seat. No problem. Take a seat, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. When you we can see a few examples of this as we go through it. Second source, the Aseres HaDibros, right? The first thing that says is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, right? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Tzisicha Meretz Mitzrayim. Once after you get past the first of the Aseres HaDibros, then you've got commands, right? Lo yeh lecha elohim acherim and everything else. Hashem says this, don't do this, don't do this. The very first one, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's not a. How is that a mitzvah? It's not a command. It's simply a statement. I am Hashem your God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, right? So it's just a statement. Why is that? Where in that is the actual command? So the point is that the first of the Aseres HaDibros establishes the reality, the fact of Hashem's existence. Following that, all the commands flow. Everything else flows from that. Okay. So what we find fascinatingly is, if you look at the way Rosh Hashanah is described in the Torah, it's very, very similar. What does the Torah say? So that's like every Yom Tov. You're not allowed to do malachas that are forbidden in Yom Tov. Yom Trua Yalochem. It's not stated, of course we understand it as a command, but it's stated as a fact. Yom Trua Yalochem. This shall be a day of Trua, a day when you blow the shofar. It's a statement of a fact rather than a direct command. Of course it is a command, it is a mitzvah, but the way it's phrased is it's just a statement in and of itself. The idea here is that becoming commanded is, right? That is, they fall all the time. The one who is commanded is, becoming commanded is Rosh Hashanah. That's what it is. It is actually entering that state of command. So It's not like anything else in the Torah where we're already here, we're already established, we know who we are, right? We know who Hashem is, everything else. From then onwards, Hashem says, do this and this and this. Rosh Hashanah is the very beginning, the beginning of everything. It's the beginning of our existence. As we said, linking back to the creation of the world, creation of man. That's what it is. It's the very beginning. And therefore, it's establishing Hashem as king in that respect, in that sense. And what we see, of course, we see that reflected in several different aspects of Rosh Hashanah, other aspects of Rosh Hashanah as well. The Yerushalmi says like this, Va'asisem, it picks up on the next pasuk in the Torah, Va'asisem oila l'reach nechach, you shall create an oila, and that oila should be l'reach nechach, should have a fragrance, beautiful fragrance, Hashem. This is the korban that's poured on Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Birnbaum, he says, all the korbanos you find, you shall offer. Okay, and here it says you shall make. If you're following it on source 4, since you've entered into judgment before Rosh Hashanah and you've come out in peace, I consider as if you are a completely new creation. You shall make is because you become a new creation. That's the point. We become a new creation on Rosh Hashanah because that was the day that Hashem created man, and that is their Rosh Hashanah itself, which is what we are, what is happening to us as well, as we'll see. And therefore, of course, we also have the whole idea of Malchus itself. What is Malchus? Source 5, that you should crown me over you. That is the purpose, that is the function of Rosh Hashanah itself. Another place we find this in the Torah, the same idea, just to sort of explain it and helps allow us to understand how this works, is in is last week's parsha. Last week's parsha begins, when you come into the land that Hashem has given you, and you have to bring and it says you have to bring the Bikurim. You have to bring the first fruits. So you bring the Bikurim, and the Kohen, and he says that he gives it, the farmer makes a whole declaration in front of the Kohen, and he says, as we know, he says the words of the Haggadah, Arami Ovidovi, etc., etc. Rashi says, what is the statement that the farmer makes? V'omar to'elov. This is the last line of source 6. She'ein cho kofui tov. That you do not, that you are not, that you have gratitude. That you understand you're not in a position where you accept something without being thankful for it. That's what it means to be kofui tov. Kofui tov is someone who basically has something good that's done for them, but doesn't appreciate it properly. That's the essence of the Bikurim. That's the idea, right? Basically, the farmers worked the whole year, basically on these crops. The very first ones he brings to Hashem and says, "I am grateful for what I have." That's the idea. That's the essence. The Medrash says that the world was created for the sake of Bikurim, which is a remarkable statement. You know, why should the Bikurim, all mitzvahs, why should that be a purpose of creation? The answer is the same idea. The Torah says, it shall be when you come into the land. There's no command yet. The command will come later, after you first established yourself as a commanded person. What the farmer is really doing with Bikurim is the farmer is turning around and saying, I am grateful. Saying to Hashem, I am grateful. I acknowledge that all that I have is because of you. And so what is he really doing? What he's really doing is saying, I am one who is commanded. Because I have that level of gratitude, because I appreciate that you created me and you gave me everything that I have in life, therefore I have entered the realm of someone who's commanded. And then he brings the Bikurim, if that makes sense. So it's exactly the same idea. So just to sort of recap, so we understand exactly where we're up to. We are trying to understand how it's possible to bring something new and innovation into something which is a fixed cycle. How can you have Rosh Hashanah? You have a Shana, which means repetition, which means it comes again, goes around every year, and then you have a Rosh. It's a cycle, it's a circle. Circles don't have beginnings, yeah? Yet we have to make it a beginning somehow. And to understand that, we have to go back to what the essence of the notion of being commanded in something is. What is that? What exactly does that? What exactly does that mean? And we said that if you can trace a pattern from Bereshis, the beginning of the Torah, which is understood to be one of those 10 utterances the world was created, even though it's not a direct command. There's no, Hashem doesn't say there, do something, it's just in the beginning, okay? The idea being that it is not a command, it's just the very establishment of the world. That's what Bereshit does, it establishes the world. And it teaches us that commands can only follow once the existence has been established. You have your first establish the existence, establish the reality, and then commands can follow. Rosh Hashanah links to that, and we'll develop that more in a moment, right? How Rosh Hashanah links to the creation of man specifically. But Rosh Hashanah links to it in this sense because the Torah does the same thing with Rosh Hashanah. It says, Yom Trua Yelochem. There's no command yet. It's just going to be. This is a fact. We are going to establish with this day the reality of existence, if you like. That's what it does. And we find, and this idea we said in Yerushalmi, that it's as if we're created anew on that day. We become new creations on that day. And that's, of course, what we mean when we say we crown Hashem as king, because we enter that state of being commanded on Rosh Hashanah. And we said it's the same with the Bikurim. The farmer is one who enters the it enters the statement of it enters the situation of being commanded when by effectively declaring that he has gratitude. Okay, everything clear so far? Okay. Please do stop me if anything is unclear, or indeed ask as well. Any questions? Whatever. So, yeah.
Is the Jerusalem sign, is it a circle or is it a spiral? So it's not exactly a circle.
The year. Well, in a I know what you mean in terms of the climb. Ideally, it should be a spiral. That's the idea. So it'll climb somewhere. But if you look at it, the basics is it's a cycle, right? I mean,
if you're looking top down, you'll just see a circle, but it should be that each.
Well, because there are high points. You mean it's like a high point of the year, or
no? Yeah, it's just the point of the year where you're one. It's not 1 year after the other on a flat plane. It's sort of
that's true in terms of the. I think that's obviously that's true in the human experience, right? So the way we experience life, the way we experience the year, is it builds on top of the year before, whether good or bad. So it just does. That's a fact, right? It just builds up. That's definitely true. But if you look at it purely in terms of the way this cycle of the year itself is set up, it's a cycle. It's a circle. You get the same points every year, right? And that's what we're trying to sort of get to the bottom of. So where is that? What is exactly the newness that exists in Rosh Hashanah, if that's the case? So we're at the bottom of the page. Those who have the sources, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah as follows, and this is the beginning of how to understand how we can actually achieve this idea of making something new out of Rosh Hashanah itself. So the Gemara says that it's actually a Mishnah, says there are actually 4 Rosh Hashanah. There are 4 heads of the year. There are 4 beginnings. There are 4 times in the year which are really Rosh Hashanah, right? Number 1, you have Pesach al Atzvot. The world is judged 4 times. Pesach, the world is judged for how much grain is going to be that year. Al Atzvot, Ba'atzeres al Peres or Ilon. Shavuos, the world is judged on the fruits of the tree, what they're going to be like, how good they're going to be, whether it's going to be enough fruit or not. Rosh Hashanah, Kol boy olam over in the fun of Kivnei Morah, very famous phrase we're familiar from the Son of Tokef. The whole world passes in front of Hashem like sheep in front of the shepherds. Different ways of understanding that particular phrase, Kivnei Morah. I'll take the simplest explanation. It's like the sheep pass one by one. That's the one we're always familiar with. That metaphor of how Rosh Hashanah is described. Hashem understands everything we do, all our actions, and investigates and looks at each one of us individually on Rosh Hashanah itself. And finally, on Sukkot, Nidonin al Hamayim. We judge for water for the coming year in the Bris Hamikdash. There was a whole. That's why we have the simple space. Hasho'eva, the drawing with water. The Nisuch Hamayim, the pouring water. That was a whole. Sukkot is very much associated with water. Fine. Now, if you look carefully at this, Rosh Hashanah is very much the odd one out of the 4. Can you see why? Sorry to make it a bit participatory.
People not food.
Well, it's not food as well, but think about the process. The way it's it's completely different to the other 3, right? What is a judgment? The other 3 make perfect sense in terms of judgment, right? on Pesach, we're judged for the grain that year. What is that? What is the judgment process? The judgment process is Hashem decides whether the crops are going to be good that year or not, depending on maybe our merits or not, however you understand that judgment process. But it's a judgment process that takes place because of that's what Hashem has decided the world should be run. Really, you'd expect the Mishnah to say, as we refer to in certain parts of our davening, which we'll come back to, on Rosh Hashanah, right? Rosh Hashanah, l'chaim u'lemoves, for life and death, for example, right? If you wanted to follow the pattern of the other three, you would say, right? Chag al mayim, but Rosh Hashanah, al chaim, for example, al chaim, whatever, chaim b'nei, whatever you want to say. It's going to be something which fits the pattern, and instead it doesn't. It's completely different. On Rosh Hashanah, everyone passes in front of Hashem kivnei moro. It doesn't say anything about judged for life and death. We know that's the case. Everyone is judged on Rosh Hashanah, but it's phrased in a completely different way. So why is this? So it has to be, says Ramesh Shapiro, like this, that the essence of Rosh Hashanah is defined by those words. What is the essence of Rosh Hashanah? That we pass in front of Hashem as individuals. That is the most important part of that statement. Over in Lefonov, kivnei moro. That idea of the shepherd counting his sheep one by one, where there's only enough space for one sheep to go through at a time. So it's as individuals. The Gemara has a number of explanations of what kivnei moro means. Some say it was a particularly high route up a mountain pass, I think, whereas a narrow pass, many people could only go through one at a time. But either way, it's the same idea, right? It's the idea of individuals passing one by one. So the idea must be that on Rosh Hashanah, we're meant to look at ourselves as if we are the only person in the world, right? That Hashem looks at us as if we are the only ones, each one individually. As if we are, on that day, trying to ourselves individually fulfill the purpose of creation, right? That must be the essence of what Rosh Hashanah is. That's what's being defined here, that individuality, okay? What does that mean? So if you turn over to the next... Yeah, I think the Gemara has three different explanations as to what exactly that phrase means, because it's not entirely clear. It's a bit obscure. B'nai Moro might be a place. It might be there is a reference, or it could mean the actual reference to the sheep in front of the shepherd.
Sheep are in a herd. They're not individuals.
No, but when they're counted, they are counted in separately. When the farmer counts the sheep, or needs to, for example, to take mice, the 10th one, which is given to the whatever, is going to pass them through a narrow place. That's the idea. It's definitely the passing of through a narrow place. That's the idea. Yeah. In Nasana Tokef, we use the phrase Kavakoras Roya Edro, which is definitely referring to like a person. Yeah, Levaker is to investigate, to check, right? Roya is to graze, Edro is flock. So in Nasana Tokef, we definitely take that approach. The author of the Piyut takes that approach. Now, if you look at the main tefillas of Rosh Hashanah, you notice something fascinating. We're all familiar with Zacheinu L'Chaim, right? Zacheinu L'Chaim, we begin our tefillas. But did you know that Zacheinu L'Chaim was a very controversial tefillah? It was introduced in the time of the Gaonim, and so about 8th, 9th century, maybe 10th century. And this controversy is brought down in the halachic Sfarim. And the controversy really was that it's not mentioned specifically in the Gemara. It's an introduction to Shemona Esrei, which is later than the Gemara, and more significantly, it is a tefillah for life. Please grant us life. Remember us for life. In a part of the Amidah where it doesn't really belong. If you look at the structure of the Amidah, you'll be familiar with the fact Amidah begins with praising Hashem, right? In every respect, mentioning the others, mentioning Chaim Mesim. And then we have the middle brachas. Let's take a weekday Shemona Esrei. The middle brachas, of course, those are our requests to Hashem. And then at the end, again, we finish off with also praising Hashem as well, or references to Moedim at the end, right? And to insert Zacheinu L'Chaim there was quite a controversial thing. Now, obviously, the matter, we do have it. So the matter was settled that is indeed absolutely a central part of our tefillah. But the reason why it's important for our purposes is because if we look at the main part of the tefillah, so the tefillah that was actually established at the time of Chazal, we do not find a reference specifically to judgment, to the fact of judgment, right? It's mentioned in Zacheinu L'Chaim, but it isn't mentioned specifically in our tefillahs themselves. It is mentioned in, of course, the Musaf. In Musaf, it's mentioned in Musaf, and as I said, we mentioned before in the Nasana Tokef. There's no question that it is a central theme of Rosh Hashanah, What we want to understand is, if it's so central, so why when Chazal put together the Amida itself, right, it isn't there in the same way, hasn't got the same emphasis, right? Instead, what do we have? And so on and so on. Reign over the whole world. Let your fear be amongst all the nations of the world. There should all the wickedness should disappear. That's the focus. The focus is Hashem's majesty, the crowning of Hashem as king, Hashem ruling over the whole world. That is what we focus on. But according to the way we've just explained, that the idea is that Hashem looks at each and every one of us as individuals, whether we are able to fulfill that purpose of creation. What is really the focus of our Tzilas? We can understand what it is. The focus is, it's as if Hashem is saying to us, can I rely on you as an individual, him or her, to fulfill the whole purpose of creation as a whole world in and of yourself? And therefore, it's clear why we daven for these incredibly grand and lofty ideals and visions of a world that is perfected under Hashem's kingship, because Hashem is looking at us and saying, this is the day of creation. You're alone. You're the only one. You're the first human being on the planet. Within you rests the whole world, the future of the whole of creation, right? That is Kivnei Moron. That's the idea. You are the only one. Now, if you're the only one, right, so you're going to have to think big. You can't think small anymore. You can't think just about what's going to be with me here and there. I've got to think much bigger about the whole world, right? Again, all of this is no contradiction, of course, to being able to daven for whatever one wants on Rosh Hashanah, personal, private needs. We hold that you can absolutely do that, daven for one's own needs on Rosh Hashanah. It's not a contradiction. We're trying to understand here the theme, the overriding theme of what Rosh Hashanah is meant to do, which will help us, hopefully, with our own tefillas as well. Now, if you look at the source 9, in a way, this is really, I think, the key to the piece of the puzzle. There's a fascinating medrash. The medrash tells us that when Hashem came to create Adam, Hashem came to create Adam Arishan. I'm just going to sort of paraphrase, you don't have to read the whole thing inside. The Malachi Asharis, so the Malachim, the angels came along, and they formed different groups, a different category. They were opposing groups, opposing sides. Some of them said, yeah, that's quite a good idea to create man. And others said, no, we don't like this idea at all. It's a very, very bad idea. So there was a big machlokas going on in Shemayim between the Malachim. Should man be created or should he not? And the Medrash brings it from various psukim, talks about chesed and emes. Chesed, the midah, the attribute of chesed, said that mankind should be created because they have tremendous potential to be kind, to do kindness to others. Amazing what human beings can do. Emes said, no way. Al yivra shekulo shkorim. They all lie. Human beings have a tendency to lie. So it's something you have to fight against. To try and tell the truth is not as simple. It's easier to do a chesed than to tell the truth sometimes. So this was the debate that's going on. And there are other examples that the Medrash carries on. The attribute of tzedek, righteousness, that man should be created because man can do really righteous acts. Shalom, the midah of shalom, of peace, said Al Yivra, no, don't create mankind because the kulek tzata is all machlokas. Everything is machlokas with human beings. They're always arguing. So this was the debate that went on Shemayim. And the Medrash carries on. And then a few lines later, there's an incredibly surprising thing. But this is where, if you skip to the second paragraph in source 9, Rabbi Huna Rabba Shal Tziparin Omar, Rabbi Huna was the Rabbi of Tziparin, he said, Acham Alecha Ashores Medainin, Elum Elu, or it's Omar, it's paraphrasing. No, he's saying that whilst they were still arguing with each other, Elum Elu, or Misaskin Elum Elu, so they're busy discussing, they're busy arguing. Whilst that was going on, Baroi HaKadosh Baruch Hashem created mankind. Hashem created man. Amalek said to them, what are you arguing about? I've done it already. I've already created. Now this is really interesting. What's really going on? So there's this big debate. Should we create man? Should we not? And they can't settle. They can't decide whether it's a good idea or not. And Hashem turns around to them and says, what are you still arguing about? He's already here. I've already created man. So the idea is that and really the question is, well, why did Hashem ask their opinion? However, we're phrasing it, of course, in human terms, but just understand it, but in some level.
free choice.
Yeah, there's many multiple questions here in terms of the free choice of angels. So we've got to get to the message. Any medrash like this, you have to get to the message. What is the medrash trying to tell us with this, right? Why does Hashem ask the opinion, so to speak, of the malachim? If anyway, he's going to ignore them and do what he wants to do anyway. He's going to create man anyway. So what's the point? Okay, it must be that the message of the medrash is that the deliberation itself of whether to create mankind, is the essence of what a human being is. That very problem over whether it's a good or bad thing for mankind to exist, that is a human being. Human beings are, their creation of mankind was never fully settled. That's the point of the medrash. It was never settled. It was never decided whether or not it was actually a good thing for mankind to be created. On that one occasion, Hashem stepped in and said, I'm going to decide this and I'm going to create man, but only once. Hashem only does that once at the very beginning. And every year on Rosh Hashanah, it again hangs in the balance because it's not clear. Is it good or bad for mankind to exist? And the point here is that the task that we have on Rosh Hashanah is to tilt the scales towards it being worth us being here. That idea of this very debate that's going on between the angels, is it good or bad? I don't know. On the one hand, they lie. On the one hand, they can do nice things to people. On the one hand, they create machlokas all the time. On the other hand, they can be quite righteous. That whole deliberation and dilemma is left still in existence. It's never settled. And Hashem says, I'm going to give man a chance. I'm going to create him. I'm going to create man. I'm going to see what's going to happen. But after that, every subsequent Rosh Hashanah is the task that we have is to effectively try for the coming year and settle the argument. Try and see whether we can settle the argument that it's actually worthwhile us being here at all. So the essence of who we are as creation, the essence of our existence, the essence of our creation is the notion of judgment, dilemma, that balance, those scales. That's who we are. By definition, that defines the way we came into existence. And our task is, as we're going to lay in the Psukim in this week's Parsha, source 10, Hashem says, it's a choice. Everything is a choice, good and bad, life and death, it's all a choice. Hashem says, you should choose life. Our task is to choose life. Every Rosh Hashanah, like every other Yom Tov, you'll be familiar with the idea that in every Yom Tov, something happens that basically kind of, recreates us in that moment that we once were. The obvious example is Pesach, right? What do we have? What happens with Pesach? We recreate Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yeah, we leave Egypt again. That's what we do on Seder night, yeah? And it's the same, we say the same idea on Shavuos, we receive the Torah again, right? That's the cycle of the year. That's what it is. It's a recreation of that event every year, right? What happens on Rosh Hashanah? Same thing. On Rosh Hashanah, we undergo the same event again, the undecided creation of man. That's what we undergo on Rosh Hashanah. And Hashem says, you need to choose life now. You need to work out whether you deserve creation. And that is why in Rosh Hashanah, we're created, we pass before him as individuals, right? Because that's how man was. That's how the first man was, the same thing. It's the same idea. And we focus, therefore, in our tefillos on the whole world, because we are the whole world. On Rosh Hashanah, we literally are the whole world, each and every one of us as individuals, because we are going back to that very first moment, that very first point in time. So what we understand from this is that the point and the essence of Rosh Hashanah is not that we are somehow hiding the fact that, the fact that there's a judgment on this day. We asked that question about why it is that the main focus of the tefillas don't mention the judgment, right? And don't mention the whole idea of the fact that there's a judgment going on between life and death. On the contrary, they do, because the entire focus of the tefillas is about the whole universe, the whole world, crowning Hashem as king. That is Hashem saying to us, this is the judgment. The judgment is it worth you being here? Is it really worth you being here? Are you going to fulfill or do something to fulfill what the purpose of creation is? Now, there's another aspect of Rosh Hashanah which helps us understand this further and is essential to this. Is Rosh Hashanah a day of Simcha or not? Right, it's a famous question. Right, is it a day of Simcha or not? So it's very difficult. Everyone understands Yom Kippur, everyone finds that's okay because it's kind of clear where it is, and everyone understands Sukkot because that's quite clear where it is. But Rosh Hashanah, of course, there's a lot of confusion because on the one hand, it's all davening and shul and everything else, and all the the lofty spiritual elements of the day, and on the other hand, we seem we also quite emphasize the food as well and everything. So we don't. What is it a day of Simcha? The source for Rosh Hashanah being a day of Simcha is a pasuk in Nehemiah. This is source 11, series of pasukim. In Sefer Nehemiah, there was effectively they were told, the people were told how they hadn't been basically keeping the Torah properly, and they were terribly sad and terribly upset when they heard that. Once they came back, Ezra and Nehemiah brought them back from the exile from the first Beis Hamikdash to build the second Beis Hamikdash, but they discovered all sorts of things that they hadn't been doing properly when they should have. Ezra says to them, or Nehemiah says to them, sorry, he said to them, this is Pasuk Yud in source 11, the last Pasuk, go and eat nice things, drink the nice things, and go and send gifts to someone who needs it, because today is holy to our Lord, our Master. Don't be sad, because the joy of Hashem is your strength. He's describing Rosh Hashanah. It was the day of Rosh Hashanah. He said, today is a day when you must have simcha. The Rambam says that Rosh Hashanah, one shouldn't have simcha yasera, too much simcha, right? It's got to be moderated on Rosh Hashanah for obvious reasons, but the simcha is definitely present. Problem is that the idea of being judged, about the future, the coming year, and about Chaim, it doesn't seem like a great way to promote simcha. So how are you supposed to balance what is the elements of simcha in the day, right, with this notion of being judged? Says Moshe Shapiro, a beautiful idea. What is joy? What is simcha? So simcha, what creates simcha? Simcha, joy, is created by anything that expands our current sense of being. It's a beautiful idea. Think about it. When are people the happiest? Say at a marriage, or the birth of a child, or even a graduation. The achievement of why? Why is that so happy? Why is that such a moment of happiness? Because you suddenly become bigger than you were before. You suddenly have expanded your horizons. Your horizons are much bigger than before. There's a sudden ability to experience life in a more colorful way than you did yesterday. Let's break it down into that, right? So now we can understand Rosh Hashanah is such simcha. The joy, the simcha of Rosh Hashanah is because on Rosh Hashanah we become the whole world. So instead of being preoccupied, as we are the whole year, right, with our own particular considerations and concerns that are specific to us, all of a sudden on Rosh Hashanah, we're standing there in shul, and we're talking about Hashem and the whole world, and you should reign over the whole world. We've suddenly expanded our horizons beyond anything. That's why it's the essence of simcha. That's the greatest joy. The greatest joy is to realize that we have potential to do much, much more than we thought we could, and to have much more of an impact than we thought we could. As the famously the Gemara says, why was a person created as an individual? So that he or she should be able to say, right, the world was created for me, for my sake, my purpose. That seems like a bit of a way to encourage gaiva, haughtiness. You say, it was all for me, right? There's this lovely, lovely anecdote. One of the famous, Hasidic Rebbe's used to carry two pieces of paper, right, in his pocket. One pocket would say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me, and the other one it says, Anochi offer va'ifa, I am dust and ashes. You have to have two pockets. That's why you have two pockets. So one has that, and you need to balance them, right? That's the point. But what is the idea? The idea is when we realize that we actually are the entire world, right? We actually are, everything. The world is defined by us. We are the whole world. Then that expands our horizons tremendously. So the Rambam says, source 12. The Rambam says like this. He says, the Rambam says that on a person has to see themselves the whole year as if they are on those scales, half-half, balanced halfway. Somebody's hard enough in Rosh Hashanah to think like that, right? And let alone trying to do that the whole year. But the Rambam says that's what a person has to do the whole year. And he goes on to describe where the famous idea that, one negative thing can tilt it the wrong direction, one positive thing tilts it the right direction, not only for you, but for the entire world, right? And then he says and finishes off by saying, I'm just skipping to the bottom of that paragraph. That's why we do so many mitzvahs and important good deeds between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Now, the question is obvious, right? If we're focusing on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, why does he say the whole year? You've got to look at yourself like that. Maybe it should just be on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Why is it that it's the whole year? It says Rosh Hashanah as follows. He says that there are two levels to how we're supposed to live as Jews. Number one, we live as commanded people. Like we started off, right? We've been created, and therefore we've been commanded to live in a certain way, to live in a moral and ethical way based on the Torah. That's what we have to do. Rosh Hashanah introduces something else to that, another level, a deeper level. On Rosh Hashanah, we become involved in a decision-making process with every act we do. Every act we do becomes, because of Rosh Hashanah, a decision-making process as to whether we should be doing this or not. We should choose life, make the right decision. Very hard, but you can make the right decision. Should I do this? Should I not do that? Right? The conscious recognition of choice is what completes our mitzvah observance, right? We are obligated to keep mitzvahs. That's the basic level. But the deeper point to that is we have a choice as well every time we decide to do the right thing or not, right? We have a choice. That element of choice is in every situation. And what happens on Rosh Hashanah, which affects the whole year, this is what affects the whole year, that's why it's the whole year, is the idea that every situation we can imbue, if we try hard, with the power of choice, with the belief, the genuine belief, that actually what we do has an impact not just on us, but on the entire world. That's the message of Rosh Hashanah that inspires us to live that way the whole year round. It's a very different way of thinking of things, because it's a way of thinking which is much broader, it's much bigger. Rosh Hashanah is meant to set the tone for the whole year. That's what it does. That's the beginning of the year. It sets the tone for the whole year where we believe genuinely that we're individuals who are responsible for the whole world. And therefore, when that happens, Hashem creates mankind, and it's very good. Hashem looks at everything he does, and it's very good. As I'll say, ma'od, you rearrange the letters, you get to Odom, mankind. Why? Because ultimately, mankind has the ability to complete creation, the ability to make the whole creation, tov ma'od, essentially, to make it as good, very, very good. That's what mankind can do. And the key that we learn from Rosh Hashanah is that it is the choice itself that has that impact. It's the fact that we recognize that we have a choice and we choose to do the right thing. That's what makes us worthy. That choice, that desire, that wish to do the right thing in life, that makes us worthy of creation itself. Even if we know that we're often not going to get there. In other words, even if we know that come the next day, the next week, and everything else, it's not going to work out as we hoped and wished it would. But the point of Rosh Hashanah is that we are there at the critical moment when Hashem is deciding, is it worth creating man or not, right? It's up to you now. I did it at the beginning, that whole argument with the Malachim, you are left in that balance the whole time. Is it worthwhile? Is it not? We sway that in the right direction by making the conscious and positive choice to effectively want the world to be the best it can possibly be, to want the world to fulfill the purpose of creation. That's the Malach al Kol Kud. That's what we're doing when we daven all those tefillos, when we stand on Rosh Hashanah and we say these incredibly lofty ideals of how Hashem creates not just he created the world, but how he should rule over the world, and that the way that wickedness should disappear like smoke, and all these lofty ideals. What we're really doing is effectively we are exercising our own free choice to choose and wish through our choice that the world should be in the right direction or in the wrong direction. That's the essence of what Rosh Hashanah is. So we began with the idea of, and just to sort of recap hopefully what we've learned this evening, and then we'll take any questions, is that innovation, what is the innovation in Rosh Hashanah? What is the new thing that exists in Rosh Hashanah? With this, we can understand that it's true. It's a cycle, right? Every year comes around and it's Rosh Hashanah again, right? But what we can introduce, the new element that we get to introduce each Rosh Hashanah is, and this is the only thing really which establishes it as a moment of judgment, is the creation of man. That's what it commemorates. That is the day. The day of Rosh Hashanah is the sixth day of creation when man was created. That is what Rosh Hashanah is. And what really does that mean? What relevance does that have for us? It introduces to us the point that mankind lies in the balance. And it's our choice we have the choice to affect that. In other words, we have the ability to choose life. We have the ability on Rosh Hashanah to set the direction of travel for ourselves and by extension for the whole world, because we're those individual sheep going through. So each of us has the power to do that in and of ourselves. And that's a totally new element, because when you go through life with a sense of every decision I make has that level of impact, right? I'm not saying we can always live on that level. We are in Rosh Hashanah, we're living in the world of where we would like to be in theory, right? That's, it's not that we feel we're suddenly going to become transformed in every way, right? But at least on Rosh Hashanah, we can have a direction in our tefillas where we think to ourselves, I really make a difference. And the choices that I will make today, this Rosh Hashanah, have an impact on the whole world. And maybe what it can do is it can rub off on us that mindset of Rosh Hashanah. What maybe we can be left with just a little bit is what this Rambam is saying. That instead of whenever we do a mitzvah the rest of the year, we're thinking to ourselves, I do a mitzvah because I'm told to do it, which is true. That's one level. But because of our learning from Rosh Hashanah, the innovation that we gain is that not only do I do it because I'm told to do it, I do it because I am exercising my free choice to do so in the right way, and therefore providing a reason for existence, a reason for mankind's existence. I'm recognizing the fact that life is all about choice. That's what we do on Rosh Hashanah. We recognize that life is about choice, and that is, I think, the innovation from that inauguration from the beginning, from the year itself. That's what Rosh Hashanah does for us if we can realize it properly. Any questions? Whether that's or anything unclear? Yeah.
Well, so it's about tangent.
A bit louder so people can hear on Zoom.
Ask slightly tangent.
Yes.
Word.
Yeah.
If a husband and wife are part of the same soul, are they judged as a unit or are they judged as individuals?
It's a really good question. The implication is from the it may well be that I'm not familiar with how it may well be that they're starting to talk about this in detail. But the description seems to be that there is individuality here. That seems to be right. There is a fundamentally, even if we're understanding is that a couple have the same soul, but ultimately each one is still responsible for their own actions. So on a Rosh Hashanah level, where Hashem is looking at each individual, it would seem that it would be an individual, right? That would be my. It's not that there isn't a connection, but it would seem in this, from the way we're looking at it here, it would seem that it's a personal, individual thing. That would be what I would think. But it may well be this. But it's clear there's, you're absolutely right in terms of the broader sense of connection. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. And also I should say, and thank you for joining us on Zoom as well, and especially for Toras Chaim and anyone else. If we have future shiurim, maybe sort of month shiur, I'd be really happy if we continue this type of format. If you want to host, we can take turns. Just we'll do the first one here, but maybe future occasions if someone wants to host and invite friends to say a monthly shiur or whatever, then I'm really happy to sort of rotate and book in people's houses. It's maybe it's nicer than the shiur. Ksiva tova. Have a good. Thank you for joining.